Thanks, Marcy. So welcome to our second session of the 2020 New Educator Institute. Marcy, if you want to go ahead and click the slide, we have a few thank yous and introductions that we want to make sure we do. The first one is just a welcome from our Executive Board of Directors. So the Council for Exceptional Children, as you probably know, is an international organization made up of advocates around special education. And so as teachers, as family members, students, all of us working to make sure that we are advocating for quality professional development, quality services, quality policies at the national and local level. And so Indiana is a state that has really been strong in our membership and our support of new educators. And so that's why you're all here. So part of that is just a welcome from all of us. So we have President Amy Hobbs here, and I am the president-elect, Tara Reinhardt. Past president is Tony England. Our treasurer is Katie Thompson, secretary Tracy Henn. Our membership is Dr. John Summers, conference awards, Dr. Cheryl Bremer. Our student chapter advisor is Teresa Nipson-Meyer. I'm also the CAN representative, which is a policy advocacy looking at legal kinds of things. We have a delegate representative, so that is the person who represents the needs of all of our constituents, and that's Amber Wolf. We have our ICASE liaison, who is more for the administrators of special education, and that's Dr. Angie Balsley. And then Indiana CCBD is our Council for Children with Behavioral Disorders, and that's Kelly Cerisi. And then we also have our committee, PD committee lead, which is Jolly Purcell. All right, next slide, please. So a great thanks goes to our Superintendent of Public Instruction, Dr. McCormick. She has been definitely a champion of this work, and also Dr. Holzapfel, who is our Director of Special Ed for Indiana, who are funding, quite frankly, your membership for 1 year of CEC membership for both the national organization and the local organization. So you'll get lots of journals, you'll get access to online materials and professional development and part of this series. And then part of Marcy's team, this is the whole team, the Indiana IEP Resource Center. We are very blessed in Indiana to have such a thing. Not every state has that. And so as a special educator, they are there to support you, to provide resources. They have a wealth of knowledge on their website. So you may never even talk to any of these folks, but you will definitely utilize their work. They're there to support administrators, general ed teachers, general ed administrators, families. So really just a great wealth of resource if you check out their website and their training sessions. So we have a quick video. Wanted to just thank you, quite frankly, for being a hero and for being part of the educational workforce right now. It's a tough job, and to be a first-year teacher during COVID is definitely something that you might not have signed up for in the way that you thought you were when you maybe first dreamed of becoming a teacher. And so just a quick video to just say how much we thank you.
I've got a public service announcement for every teacher, educator, and counselor out here in the world. You are American heroes. When this pandemic first took place, everybody was talking about how amazing and awesome and how essential doctors and nurses and firemen and police officers, first responders are, and I agree, but guess what? You are essential. You all are American heroes because you show up and you show out every single day for the life of these kids. And when this COVID-19 happened, you told yourself that you would not stop that from allowing you to give these kids the absolute best that they deserve. We're talking about American heroes like the first responders. We're talking about American heroes like Doctors Without Borders. They phenomenal whether they in Afghanistan or in Johns Hopkins University. They told themselves nothing will stop them from being successful. Nothing will stop them from being powerful. Nothing will stop them from bringing that aid. You all are American heroes like Representative John Lewis. He told himself nothing was going to stop him. 45 plus times arrested and put in jail. Skull fracture. He didn't sign up for that, but he signed up for justice. He signed up for equality. He signed up for love. He signed up for unity. And I know what some of you are thinking. You didn't sign up for virtual learning. You didn't sign up for masks in the class. I get it, but you did sign up for education, American hero. You did sign up to bring help and to bring comfort and to bring relief to these kids, American hero. You did sign up to be educators, to mold them and shape the hearts and minds of our future leaders, American hero. You did sign up to go above and beyond and reach these kids where they are, believing that they can do great things in the future, American hero. And I got no doubt what you can do and accomplish when you have your mindset and your perspective intact. So do me a favor. Don't show the world what you can do. Show the world who you are, an American hero.
So again, maybe not what you signed up for, but what you were made to be and made to do and made to serve during this time. So do know that we appreciate you as an organization. We appreciate you as colleagues in this great profession. And so just again, thank you from the bottom of our hearts. And we're going to be there right alongside you through this journey. So next, we're going to
I've got a public service announcement.
He wants to tell you again. Hopes and fears. So this is an activity, we're going to use Padlet. So if you want to take out your phone, you can either check that QR code out. You put your camera up to it and it should take you there. We'll give you a second to do that and then Marcy will take us over there. But while you're doing that, I want you to think about your greatest fear and your greatest hope. And it can be part of this, new journey in the educational environment. When we think about hope being a medicine for a soul that's sick and tired. And sometimes, if you were on with when Dr. Bateman was talking about his 102 fever, you become sick and tired, and sometimes it just feels so insurmountable. And so how, hope is that medicine. And again, when you need a little medicine, we're here to help you with that hope. So let's go to the Padlet, Marcy, and we'll see if anybody has been able to enter anything. So my greatest hope there, you can see that, and my greatest fear, and you can just add a comment. We're going to hold off on the tweet because that's going to be our next activity. But if you can add something in there about your greatest hope, and it could just be survive through this week, make it to the weekend. We're all in probably different situations. I know our district is completely virtual, bringing some students with disabilities back. I know some students are still in person. You may be quarantined, you may have COVID yourself. So lots of things could be happening right now, and you may have hopes that others don't, but that's the whole point of this, is that we want to see what your hopes are and make connections. Yeah, so technology. I would add to that. Technology is definitely something that we are all relying on significantly right now. And so I think that's, we just hope that it works. Yeah, is that things get back to normal soon and the kids can go back to whatever it is they're learning, their way of life. Being in that safe environment with all of you as their educators, getting all of that nourishment, love, all their basic needs met is definitely a great hope. Okay, let's jump to the fear, your greatest fear. Yeah. Fear that more people get sick, we know, and now in schools closer to home. I'm in Marion County, and our district has suffered significant loss, both with our families and our staff members, and it is definitely close to home. So it is, it's a different way of teaching because sometimes we know we have to meet basic needs before we can begin to instruct. And so how we take time to go through that grieving process, maybe with our students or our colleagues or even ourselves, and try to be at baseline enough that we can engage those brains.
Chair, we have another hope that came through in the chat. So my hopes are that I am able to make a difference in my scholars' lives, even in these uncertain times.
That's great. And I can tell you that even if you don't ever find out, I know for a fact that you are making a difference. You are making a difference. That's one of the great reasons and benefits and payouts of being an educator, is that you get that opportunity every single day to make a difference in your scholars' lives. And some of us get thanked later on in life, some of us don't, but we do know that we can be very proud every night we go home knowing that we did make a difference. Yeah, definitely, Marcy. Be the one they remember 20 years later. And we all have those teachers in our brains that either are the reason we became teachers or that one that we remember supported us and loved us in just that unconditional way, even when we were having rough days. So I think that's who we all want to be. And just know that that opportunity is definitely there, and especially now. All right, well, this will stay open. So you guys have the link now. You can add to it later if you, just think of something later that you want to share with the crew. Again, this is about networking, so you can respond to other people. We want you to get to really have a tribe that you're able to go to when you need help or you just need that encouragement. All right, the next section you can see there, we'll have Marcy go to the next slide. We use social media quite a bit, and you probably use it quite a bit as an educator and just a person that is trying to stay up to date on everything going on. I know we turn to social media quite a bit. So I want you to describe your first year experience, and it can be as of today, it can be just what you're thinking, but we want you to tweet that. So if you don't have a Twitter account, it's super easy to set up. Go ahead and set that up. It's a great way to communicate with families and to share your great stories. Again, if you don't tell your story, someone else will, and you can, put a much more positive spin on it than maybe someone else. So our superintendent is very, very much into social media and Twitter specifically, and definitely wants all of our educators to share our story. And so Indiana CEC is on Twitter. You can find us at Indiana CEC. Our international headquarters is at CEC membership, so they will retweet you if you include them. And then we have at IEPRC, and again, that's Marcy's team, and they're pretty visual on social media, so they'll retweet you as well. And then we're using the hashtag NEI 2020 for all of our sessions this year. So if you're doing something really cool in the classroom and you want to share that out, please make sure you tweet it. Also, it's always optional to include your district or your administrator. We're hashtag We Are Wayne. So we always include that, and our superintendent, Dr. Butts, always will retweet and sometimes even add comments. So what a great way to tell your story. This tweet from a teacher, started my own school day count tracker. Hashtag teacher problems at Red Bull. So I'm assuming that she probably got some retweets from Red Bull because that's pretty good marketing for them. So if you're feeling this way, you could tweet something like this. You can use emojis, you can use images. That's a great thing about Twitter, is you don't have to use a whole lot of text. You don't have to be a proficient writer. You can just get it out there and use a picture. So again, try to include us in those. We'll be watching Twitter tonight to get those retweeted and out there, and maybe we'll start something. Right, so hopefully you've all received the Survival Guide for New Special Educators in the mail. So that came to you from our Indiana Department of Education. They purchased that for you as well. And so I just wanted to take you into it. We're going to be using this as a resource throughout our sessions this year, but if you can see there's a section there in the first chapter on roles and responsibilities. And as a special educator, you have a lot of roles and responsibilities. So we talk about instruction, we talk about case management, you have to manage your paraprofessionals or other staff members, you have to do consultation with your gen ed teachers, co-teaching. We talk a lot about advocacy because you're advocating for students, you're advocating for families, for programs, for services. And then you have all of those additional school duties that just being a member of your school just entail. So you may have a different checklist, but the great thing about this book is that it provides you lots of great resources and checklists, things that you don't have to replicate. You can just use theirs. So I think if you can see this, hopefully I made it big enough, but the case manager checklist. So this is just thinking about, what does your caseload look like? So communicating with other teachers, looking at your student IEPs and making sure you know who your students are, who you're responsible for. And then what does that look like for IEP maintenance and professionalism? So just a great resource. I just wanted to at least give you a glimpse of inside the book. If you did not receive the book, we'll get that to you. We can let Judy Harrison know, and Amy's saying you can just email her and we'll get it to you. Great, perfect. All right, next slide. I'm going to turn it over to Marcy so she can introduce Dr. David Bateman.
All righty. Well, you already heard that he is a great storyteller, and I love working with Dr. Bateman because he is so good at telling stories, but also not only is he a great storyteller, he is a wealth of knowledge and has so many experiences that we can learn from. And so I will let him formally introduce himself, but I just want to let you all know that he is such a genuine, kind person. And with that being said, I think it's important that remember that these sessions are for you, and Dr. Bateman will definitely stop and answer your questions that you have around special education law. If it's something that he's talking about, or even if it's completely off the cuff, he will also answer those questions as he's bobbing his head back and forth. So please make this session your own. We want to make sure you get out of it what you need. So post questions either via the chat, the Q&A, raise your hand. I'm happy to unmute you if you'd rather just talk, whatever is most comfortable for you. But we want to make sure you leave here with the information that you need to be successful in your current role. So with that being said, I will pass it over to Dr. David Bateman. Welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity, and I'm just happy to be here on many levels. So I appreciate that we're all here together. Marcy, what it would be helpful for me is if you see questions, why don't you just chime in and let me know, because sometimes I get all wound up, and I will just keep talking and just keep going, and so. And I've just had calories, so I'm raring to go right now. So who knows what's going to happen with me right now. So I appreciate the opportunity. But I'm going to cover quite a bit and talk about what's going on. There is no question about special education law that is out of bounds. So if there's something that you have, and just let you give you some sense of where we're going to go with it. So I'm going to start with a little bit of history, kind of talk about the roles that teachers have and kind of evolve to that. But towards the end, I'm going to give some specifics about just leading meetings relating to COVID, and just some tips for that because so Marcy, I'm just going to introduce myself, just to expand a little bit more on myself. I was a due process hearing officer for many years, and now what I do is I work with school districts when they have been sued. I have not been involved in a lawsuit involving a school district since about 3 o'clock this afternoon. So I'm kind of on a break right now. So I scheduled that so I could get some dinner. but there are some very specifics that we need to pay attention to and address relating to this. And so, so that's kind of where I stand with this. So I'm going to try to share my screen. Can I share my screen? Share my screen. Yeah, let me share my screen and go to that. All right. And then kind of go to just talk broadly about where we are with this. Okay. Okay. And so just focus on special education law. And I applaud Dr. Reinhardt's talk discussion relating to Twitter. And just want to remind you that in Indiana, you have a great resource. You truly have a great resource with the IEP Resource Center. And so we need to make sure that you take advantage of this and take advantage of these sessions and the camaraderie that you might be able to get from this. There's my Twitter feed, and so just kind of go from there. But let me just start with this is broadly where we're going to go, and just kind of talk about some things that we need to focus on and address this, and just kind of give you some sense of all the different things relating to this, because the guide that they're giving you from CEC is really good. And it has a wealth of information. I'm just going to kind of piggyback on many of those things as a part of this and kind of go from there and go and address this. Okay. But before we go there, I'm going to talk about some history. The vast majority of you do not remember 1975. It was a good year. It was a good year. Let me explain why. November 29th, 2 days ago, if you want to just go through this, 2 days ago and 45 years ago. So 2 days ago, we celebrated the 45th anniversary of special education as you and I know it. And what I mean by this is prior to 1975, it was completely legal in many places to prevent children with disabilities from coming to school. And I know this may seem strange, and may seem kind of something that you don't often think about, but it's very real to me. It's very real to me in the fact that and I know I've frequently talked about this, but my brother-in-law, my wife's brother, is labeled as having a profound intellectual disabilities. He's in his low 60s. He's older than I am, but it was completely legal to prevent him from attending school. Why I mean this is that he was actually not allowed to attend school for the first 17 years of his life because he would not reach the mental age necessary for him to attend school. I know that most of us don't think about this because the fact that kids attend school, it's a given. Kids attend school. That's especially kids with eligible for special education. But I just want to remind you, just truly remind you the significance of this law which was signed by then President Gerald Ford. He signed it. He did not want to sign it because he thought it would overburden schools. He did not want to school. He thought it would cost too much. There'd be too litigious, things like this. Signed it on the way to a golf tournament on Air Force One. There was no signing ceremony for a law that allowed millions of kids to start receiving education. But special education is a law. It's a field that is defined by a law. So I'm honored to talk about this with you. I'm honored to address some of these things because these are the fact that you guys are working in special education. It's very personal. Not only for my brother-in-law, I was a special education teacher. My wife is she grew up with an older brother who needed assistance. My daughter is studying. She's taking her classes for her BCBA because she desperately wants to work with kids with severe autism. And so that's what she's doing during this COVID period. And she's was working at a residential school for kids with autism earlier till it got shut down. But it was interesting about how this is working is that it's very personal. But we thank you for your service and we thank you for what you're doing. And I like this field because I can go home at the end on a Friday and feel like I've done something that helps someone. Kids, and you'll hear me say this later, kids who have disabilities at no fault of their own, and what we need to do, and we need to do something that we can do to benefit them and be part of this. So just keep this in mind as we talk about this, all right? So let me go to the significance of your role. and just talk about the significance of your role and what we're doing and what's important about this. I'm going to intertwine parts of special education law, special education aspects into this as we go through this. But I just want to have you think broadly about this, because understanding the broad parameters of what you're expected to do is vital. And understanding where we are with this is something that we need to pay attention to and pay to what we're doing this, okay? So let me just talk about this. The significance of your role, why this is important, okay? And this gets to the whole identification thing that I was just alluding to just a minute ago. Just think about this, requirements for teachers. And yes, you guys are going to be special education teachers, but the vast majority are aware of these, but these 4 things. This is something that I can't emphasize enough. The first, that most kids are not eligible prior to coming to school. Most kids, I mean, seriously, most kids, yes, we do identify some kids as eligible for special education when they're younger or prior to them coming to school. But the vast majority of kids are not found eligible till like 2nd, 3rd, or 4th grade. So we in special education play a vital role in observing these kids and helping the general education teachers understand what we can do to do this. But we need teachers who are knowledgeable of this and are aware of this and help identify this. Second, we need teachers who have knowledge of the general education curriculum and just understand what's going on. Yes, we want you to be experts in special education. We want you to be experts in special education so that you can provide appropriate services for these kids. But you need to understand what goes on in the general education world. Because what's going on there, because first, this is where these kids are when they're identified. They're not coming to us typically from special education, but we need to understand where we are this. But why is this so important is, and I was just doing a presentation on the 45th anniversary of special education law this past weekend. When I was looking at the statistics of this, that most kids with disabilities are educated in the general education classroom most of the time. So most kids with disabilities are educated most of the time in the general education classroom. What does that mean for us? Is that yes, they receive special education, but these kids are spending most of their time receiving services from general education teachers with general education kids. So we have to think about this. So we need teachers who will work closely with special education staff. So you need to understand this. But we need to understand all the roles and all the importance of what's going on as a part of this. It is every vital part of this that we need to pay attention to. But the primary responsibility is to be in the front line of identification. We need, you need to remind your general education staff that when they see something, let others know. Do something. Absolutely. If there's a kid who's got a reading problem, a kid who has an articulation disorder, there's a kid who seems to be ostracized socially, there's a kid who seems to be set away from others. We need to make sure that we do every single thing we can to do something to try to identify what's going on here. Now, this doesn't mean that all kids who are having problems are going to be identified as eligible for special education. But what we need to do is start trying to identify this. The district has the ultimate responsibility for identification. This is not as big a deal as it was in the 1970s. In the 1970s, getting kids in the door was what we're addressing. You'll hear me talk more about this later, but getting kids in the door was the big issue. And that's now that we've got the kids in the door, we just need to do what we can to provide the supports for them. All right. So when I said the significance of your role is to work with general education staff so that they can provide appropriate supports and identify who these kids are who are not eligible. But when I say this, I just want to emphasize, not everyone is eligible. And I want to emphasize this, all right? And I truly want to emphasize this, is that there are some kids out there who have disabilities that will not necessarily receive special education services, all right? So when I say this, all right, so we got to emphasize this, all right, because not everyone gets services, all right? So let's think about what Indiana law says. Indiana law says very specifically, for a student to be eligible for special education related service, the CCC must determine based on the evaluation results that the child first is a student with developmental delay or that a student's disability or impairment adversely affects the student's educational performance and needs special education or related services. Not every kid out there who has a disability needs special education. And I want to emphasize this, and I can't emphasize this enough, that not every kid out there who has a disability needs special education services. There are some kids out there who do not need special education. They may have a disability. And let me give you an example. I said my son, when he graduated from high school a few years ago, he had a kid who was a good friend of his who was the kid was missing his left leg as a result of a bad car accident. So there's no dispute the kid had a disability. The kid had no leg, basically from the hip down on the left leg. And so the kid, so they looked at this kid had a disability, but he was doing fine academically. He was doing fine socially. He was doing fine, just probably a little too fine socially, but he was doing fine in school. He did not need a special education teacher. So what this kid got what we refer to as a 504 plan. And what is a section 504 plan? Does my student qualify for one of these things like this? This is what the students get. And so what I want to emphasize this is the student, and a 504 plan is not for kids eligible for special education. The kids eligible for a section 504 plan, they get supports, they get accommodations, but they do not get instruction. And so what's interesting about this is these kids are in the general education classroom 100% of the time. So my son's friend, who was missing his left leg, his friend's name was Michael, he got accommodations. He did not get special education. And the accommodations he got were, he got a little extra time to transition high school between classes. So he didn't have to spend as much time between classes focusing on this. And so he could focus on just, he'd leave his class 3 minutes early. Often he could get to his next class there. If he couldn't, he would plaster himself up against the wall and wait. And then when the crowds would participate, he'd have 3 more minutes to get to class. He got a second set of textbooks, so he didn't have to carry books to and from school because of the weight on his back. And also he didn't have to run the mile in gym class. These do not require a special education teacher. But what they do is they give you assistance and they give you accommodations so that the kids can actually participate in school. And that's what we need to think about as a part of this. And that's what we need to think about as we're addressing this. So when we talk about kids eligible with disabilities, one thing that you're going to have to explain to general education teachers and to parents and to administrators is just because a kid has a disability doesn't mean they're going to get special education. They need the need of a special education teacher. And so keep this in mind as we talk about this. So there's a document that I wrote. It's a 504 accommodations guide. I will forward this again to Marcy so that she can get this to you. This is a document that helps with the writing, basically talks how to write a 504 accommodation a plan for a child. It's about 60 pages long. It goes through most of the disabilities. And is it valid? Well, a lot of states do not give guidance relating to 504 plans. So what we have to talk about here is the need of this and address this. So this document is used by 12 states and 2 of our territories on how to write a 504 plan. But it's out there, it's available, and please get this out there to whomever might benefit. A friend of mine, we're going to be turning this into a book starting this spring, so we're not going to give it away quite as freely, but it's out there for you to help benefit. But we'll make sure that you get a copy of this. Increasingly, school counselors are the ones having to write these plans, and so we need to pay attention to this. But just remind you, again, it's a 2-part test. This will reiterate this. Okay. Next thing, the importance of parents. Okay, the importance of parents and family. I can't emphasize this enough. As someone who just recently acquired a disability as a result of a bad accident, the needs of the family and helping address what's going on have been invaluable for me as just part of what I needed. So for the first few weeks after my accident, I couldn't tie my shoe, couldn't go to the bathroom by myself, couldn't drive. I just started driving again. That's pretty exciting. Had trouble just getting my legs and my feet into my pants, things like this. The family needs of this. I was a fall risk, so I had to have people to help me up and down stairs, and so all things. So families are impacted by a disability. So keep this in mind as we talk about this. But let me just explain why, and I want to emphasize this. So when we talk about special education law, is that yes, I can go through the specifics of the law and things like this. I'm not going to do that here, but I might talk about it just briefly at the end. But the importance of this is the family is vital. Why is the family vital? Is that they are considered equal partners under the law. And I share this with you, is that my brother-in-law is 62 years of age. And yes, he attended school for 1 year, many, many years ago. But the family still plays a very important role in what's going on with him. And my wife and I are gradually assuming more of the responsibilities as her mom is getting older. But parents play a very important role in this, because many of these kids, once they leave school at age 18, they still have disabilities. And the families are the ones who step up to provide services. Okay? Parents play an active role in providing critical information about their child's abilities, interests, performance, and histories. So one thing that I want to emphasize about this, as I said earlier, that I was a hearing officer for many years. Now I work with school districts when they're being sued. Is one thing, I go to contentious IEP meetings. We'll talk a little bit about IEP meetings in a little bit. But I only go to the contentious ones. And one bit of advice I can give to you, whether it's contentious or a good, easy IEP, I never go to the easy ones. I understand they still exist. Is I start every single IEP meeting I go to, because I'm the one who's brought in to lead these things, is I start every single IEP meeting that I go to with, parents, tell me about your child. Seriously, tell me about your child. It does multiple things. First, it gives us information from the parents about what they think is important relating to their child. Second, it grounds us as a team. It absolutely grounds us as a team so that we're there now focusing on a child. And it reminds us of what we're doing there, the purpose for why we're there to talk, what we need to address. Third, I take the information the parents provide us, and I put that in the present levels, because sometimes parents we don't get good information from parents if we're writing good present level statements. So I make sure that I include that information as part of the present level statement to help with what's going on. And fourth, it may change the dynamics of the meeting rather dramatically. I think it was 3 years ago. It was the end of September, a third grade girl, and we had written a great IEP relating to reading. I've gone through with a fine tooth comb. That IEP was great. We were ready, things like this. I turned to the parent, I said, parent, tell us about your child. And the parent said, yeah, I know we're here to talk about reading, but what was important is my child has no friends. No one sits with her. She's 9 years of age. She's starting to develop school phobia. She doesn't want to come to school. So I'm more concerned about that than anything else. So we spent the next hour coming up with ideas and strategies about what we're going to do to work with this girl so that she could have people either sit near her, do group activities, those kinds of things. The teacher started all these cooperative learning activities. We came together 3 weeks later to finish the IEP, and the parent said, the girl has someone who sits with her at lunch. People are playing with her on the playground. Her whole life is different. And you know why we made those changes? Because we asked the parent what was important. And we asked the parent to talk about what was going on with their child, because this child's life improved. And so keep this in mind as we address this. Yes, we need to talk about reading. Yes, we need to think about this. But I can't emphasize this enough. Talk with the parents about what they think is important and start with that. Next, build early relationships. And I want to emphasize this, is that we can all handle things as long as it's not a surprise, typically. Seriously, when there's a surprise, that's when we have trouble. And so we need to keep this in mind as we address these things. But just build early relationships. So if there's a kid who's having a problem, make sure the parents know it. Don't wait till the last day of school, things like this. My father was a superintendent of a very large school district for many years. He had 6 large high schools in his district. He always hated the last week of school because parents would find out for the first time that their child was not graduating. They had flown in Granny from the West Coast. They had pictures of the kid with a cap and gown. They had bought a cake. They had all sorts of things, reservations at a fancy restaurant. And now they find out that the child's not graduating. People can handle things as long as it's not a surprise. So build these early relationships with the families and talk with them as much as possible. Next, try face-to-face when possible. And I know that's hard. I'm aware that that's hard, especially with the COVID. And as someone who's had COVID, I didn't want to be face-to-face with anyone. But it's interesting about this is try face-to-face, because I get so much done through email. But when I Zoom with a student, we can go face-to-face and just kind of see their facial gestures, whether they get something or not. It really is important part of this. And then make sure parents are informed. make sure that parents are informed or as a part of what's going on. So if there's an issue relating to reading, the parents know. If there's an issue related to writing, the parents know. If there's an issue relating to behaviors, the parents know. So, but also let the parents know when things work well. Don't just send nasty things to the parents. Let them know when they are with us, okay? And the last one, the importance of parents, and I can't emphasize this enough, is that you will get the opportunity to attend a lot of IEP meetings this year. But for many parents, this is their one meeting. They've taken time off from their work. They've taken time off from their family. They've taken time off from their favorite TV show. You need to do everything you can to respect that time. Respect the time and give them the time that's necessary so that they can benefit and they can remember this. So one thing that I absolutely guarantee, I absolutely mandate is that when I'm at one of these IEP meetings, I mandate that every single person takes notes. That they're not using the time to grade. They're not using the time to play Sudoku. They're taking notes. It focuses us. You'd be surprised what we learn from this. So keep that in mind as a part of this. Keep this in mind as we address this. Okay. So importance of parents is good, but let's talk about the significance of everyone else's role on the IEP team. There are many other people who are very active members of the IEP team. And I just want to reiterate this. And so let's keep this. So let's look at what the CCC must include. A representative of the school, sometimes referred as the PAR, the public agency representative, who knows the school's resources, has the authority to commit or expend funds. So keep that in mind, because you want to be able to let people know that there's going to be services provided for what's going on. So keep that in mind, and provides and supervise the provision of specially designed instruction. This is typically referred in some states as the LEA, or local education agency representative. So as you're going through that book from CEC, that's what this is referring to. Keep this in mind. You're also going to need the student's teacher of record, or a teacher licensed in the area of the student's suspected disability. The student's not yet been determined eligible. So keep this in mind, is that you need to have someone there who knows about the child and about the child's disability. You don't want to be just making random gestures and random comments about what's going on with these kids. You want to have someone who understands precisely where we are with and what we can do to provide supports. And so you need someone who understands the roles and responsibilities, things like this, okay? At least one of the student's general education teachers, unless it's certain the student will not be participating in the general education curriculum. But I still recommend that for at least the initial ones, we have someone there who can explain how the child functions and what's going on, so that we can have a really good representation of how the child is and what we can do to support the child, okay? A person able to describe what the evaluation information means. In many districts, this is a school psychologist or educational diagnostician who can provide the supports necessary to describe the intricacies of what we're doing with this. And the parent of the student who's less than 18, things like this. We want the parents there. Oh my God, we want the parents there. I spent a few minutes ago just talking about this. So keep this in mind as we address this, is because the parents play a vital role in this. And keep that. Right, there's more in the others, okay? School district may fulfill more than one role in the CCC meeting. For example, the student's teacher of record may also serve in other roles if the teacher of record otherwise meets that requirements. If the purpose of the CC meeting is to develop or revise the transition IEP, the student must be invited. Depending on the purpose of the meeting, the CCC must include other individuals. So I can't emphasize this enough, is that this is what we refer to as the checkbox. This is what we're looking at. And does this meet the letter of the law, kind of things like this? So this is why your special ed directors, they're going to hound you to make sure that you have the right people in the room, because this is an easy get. This is an easy get. And the one thing that I want to emphasize is about the general education teacher is get a general education teacher who actually knows what the child looks like, not the general education teacher who happens to be free that period. I see so many times where the teacher who happens to be free during first period attends all the CCC meetings. And whether this teacher knows what this child looks like or ever will meet this child, this is the one who attends. What I recommend is have the teacher who's free that period go cover the class of the teacher who knows what this kid looks like and can actually talk about how this child is functioning in the general education curriculum. Don't just bring in some random teacher. Just so bring to who meets the letter of the law. Get someone in there who can talk about this and talk about where we are with this. Okay, next. The IEP and this is something that I was seeing up until about 2 years ago a lot, is that they were talking about having the whole IEP team vote and about where we are with this. Okay, just to let you know, the IEP document as of itself is a consensus document. It is not a voting document. Okay, and I truly mean this. Is so typically when you go into these meetings, what you're likely going to see is you're going to see 12 to 15 school district personnel and 1 or 2 parents, maybe a friend, so maybe 3 people altogether. That's a stacked deck. And so I was actually, I have a district about a few years ago, they would vote on this. And then all those 12, 13 people would vote for the IEP as it's written, and the parents would lose and they would vote on this. So there was a parent who was a Baptist minister who brought 60 of his parishioners to the meeting and said, these are all important people in my kids' lives. We're here for the vote. That district stopped voting as a result of that. But do not make these IEP decisions based on a majority vote. It is a consensus document. What I recommend, and again, I only attend the contentious meetings. I don't get to attend the meetings where everyone's happy. And I don't get to attend another IEP meeting until Friday. So I'm kind of on a break here. But if the IEP team cannot reach agreement, implement what the agreement parts are and continue to meet on the other components. So like the one I'm doing on Friday is we can all agree the kid needs speech language services. So we're having the speech language pathologist starting to implement the IEP, add that agreed part, things like that. So that's easy. We got that. The parts relating to the kids' learning disabilities, we're kind of in disagreement about how much or what. The parents don't think the child has a math problem. The district think the kid absolutely has a math problem. So we're going to start implementing the speech language parts, and we're going to talk about the math issues on Friday. So we can talk about this and pay attention to this. Okay. So keep this in mind as we talk broadly about this. Next, placement versus location. And I really want to emphasize this, is that in too many places, no pun intended, by the way, in too many places, we talk about placement and location as synonymous, and they're not. So keep this in mind, okay? So, and this is often a very contentious issue. This is often because keep this in mind. Placement does not refer to the physical location where services will be provided. Rather, it refers to the type of educational environment where the services will be provided. And so when you're writing your IEPs, yes, you don't write like do not write that the child will receive services in a specific school. Do not write that the child will receive services from a specific teacher. Do not write that the child will receive services from a specific paraprofessional. Just broadly write the services the child is what's going on, things like this, okay? Placement is not determined by the name of the building, it's determined by the needs of the student. This is, if there's not one thing that I wish that more special education teachers would learn, and I've been Zooming with people from across the nation in one of our territories today, is that we need to make decisions solely based on the needs of the student. I actually really don't care often about the label that the child receives. For many parents, this is a vital part of the process, and I respect that. I truly respect that. But if the child is identified as having a learning disability, yeah, that's fine. I'm okay with that, things like this. But the needs of the child dictate the services, not the label. So the child needs, whatever the child needs is dictated by what their problems are and the present level statements that we have on them. Paying attention just solely based on their label doesn't tell me the needs of the child. Because what I want to make sure that you emphasize this, is that all of the disability labels are umbrella terms. Because under the category of learning disabilities, you're going to have some kids with reading problems, some kids with math problems, some kids with spelling problems, some kids with written language problems, some kids with written language and spelling problems, some kids with written language and reading problems, some kids with spelling and math problems. There are many different combinations under there that you can potentially have. Actually, it's permutations, but many different ways of looking at this. Just because a kid has a learning disability doesn't necessarily mean that we understand precisely what's going to go on there. So emphasize the needs of the child dictating what's going on as opposed to the child's label. I mean, seriously, we use labels as an easy way to communicate things, but they don't tell me the services. Because think about this, under the label of autism, you're going to have some kids who are nonverbal, who need all sorts of supports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. As opposed to you're going to have some kids, like there's a kid down the street from me who's 17 years of age who just got his driver's license and he's off driving. And so he has so very different needs from these individuals, but under the same label. And I can't emphasize this enough. It's the needs of the child that dictate, not the label, okay? Why you don't also, so bullet point 3 here. If the IEP specifies a certain classroom, or if the IEP specifies a certain school, then parent consent would be needed to make a change. I was working with a district about 6 years ago. They wrote in the IEP that a certain teacher, and they wrote the teacher's name, would be the one who would be providing the services. And that day, the teacher and the kid had a great working relationship. It worked wonderfully. 3 weeks into the first year to school year, the teacher was involved in a bad automobile accident and did not come back to school during the remainder of the school year. Parents sued that the child was supposed to be provided services for this. They settled out of court on this one because the IEP was that had to be provided by that one teacher. Now they don't say teachers' names in this because you have to make specific changes, things, okay? So if an IEP refers to the type of educational environment and the LEA has multiple locations where the type of environment is offered, the LEA or school district may decide which location the student will attend. This is something you need to keep the parents informed about. And this is something that I can't emphasize enough, is because a lot of parents make their decisions about where they are going to provide or live based on where their kids are going to go to school. And I want to emphasize this, is that if you're going to, if parent lives next door to a school and the kid is not going to go to that school, make sure that the parents know this. Why? Because 4 years ago, in the town that I live next to, not my town, we have small towns in Pennsylvania, small school districts. The parents lived next door to school and they went to back to school night and the kid did not attend that school. The parent found that out on back to school night that the kid attended a different school. Kid would walk over to that school and then get on a bus and was transported to a different location every single day. Kid was basically nonverbal, so there was not a lot of communication between the parents. Parent at no point did not know this. And frankly, was a little upset that that was the first time that they heard about this. So keep that in mind as we address this, okay? Next, when to review an IEP. I'm gonna spend a lot of time on this one. I really am. Why? Because I think this is probably the most important thing you're gonna learn tonight. And I'm not being hyperbolic. I truly don't. I want to emphasize this, is when to review an IEP, things like this. But for me, in fact, my recommendation is after this session is over, you can take the rest of the night off. You don't have to do anything. You can put your feet up. You can just, if you have a spouse, it's your responsibility to take care of the kids or the dog, because I've learned enough. You can say these things, right? So first, okay? When to review an IEP. And I can't emphasize this enough, okay? Things like this. Legally, and this is the bare minimum, is that you need to review IEPs at least annually, all right? That's the minimum. And for me, that barely cuts it. That's barely enough. And I want to emphasize that that's hardly anything, okay? And important, it's remember the annual review requirement is focused on the meeting where the IEP was reviewed, not on the date the services are implemented. Realize certain dates may raise a red flag for auditors or reviewers. As one of those auditors, that's what we ask, things like this, okay? So this bullet point here, these next ones, these next three, they go hand in hand. And I really actually do mean this. If you learn nothing else today, you learn this, you will make significant improvements in the lives of kids with disabilities. And I really want to, I'm serious. I want to emphasize this. So keep this in mind as we talk about this, okay? Review more often if the student is having problems. And I truly, if the student is having problems, it's a district's responsibility to do this. So one thing that I recommend, and this bullet point goes with this one, at every reporting period, consider an IEP team meeting for a student who is not making progress. So if a student is not making progress, and I don't care if the student's not making, where this is, if it's a reading goal, if it's reading, if it's math, if it's spelling, written language, if the kid is having behavior issues, the kid is having some problem, then you need to meet on this. I really do mean this, is that you need to do something to help meet and change what's going on. So at the end of the reporting period, doesn't necessarily mean that there's going to be a full-blown review of the IEP, maybe just on that aspect for that child, but you need to do something to change what's going on for that child. And I mean this literally, okay? Because let me give you an example. 2 years ago, I was involved in an action where a kid, a 6th grade boy, at the end of the first marking period, they knew that he was not making progress. He was not making progress on any of his goals and objectives. And so they knew this. It was very clear, things like this. They didn't change a thing. At the end of the second marking period, there are 4 marking periods in the school district's year. At the end of the second marking period, they also knew that the child was not making progress. And they did nothing to change what was going on. They really didn't, keep this in mind. The end of the third marking period, they found out, they knew the child was still not making progress on any of his goals and objectives. They did nothing. In fact, what they said, it's too late in the school year to make any changes. We'll make changes the following year. The kid had started having behavior problems because he was getting low grades in classes. He was not making progress. He was seeing others do very well, and yet he was not. Parents got themselves an attorney, and they sued. And they sued for back when the district knew or should have known that there was an issue. And the district knew at the end of the first marking period that there was an issue, and they did nothing. And so the district came to me and said, we need to talk to you about, we're in this lawsuit. We have this, the parents are suing back for services all the way to the end of the first marking period. And now we're at the end of May. And what should we do? And so I looked at the data, and the district royally messed up. Just royally messed up. So when we settled that, I said, we're not going to fight that because we would lose, because the district knew at the end of the first marking period that the child was not making progress, and they did nothing. So second, I said, I'm not going to put a teacher on a witness stand just to go up there and to say, oh yeah, we didn't know, we didn't do anything. That doesn't make any sense. We settled that. The hard part, why also we settled this? We have a kid, you heard me say this phrase earlier before. We had a kid who has a disability at no fault of his own, who was suffering, and we did nothing for this child. Man, we were providing basic services when we knew that this child was not making progress. That district should have been sued because they should have been changing something for that child. So when you find out that something's not happening for this child, okay, first, and you don't do anything, I'm not going to defend you. I'm not going to defend you because kids suffered when you knew that there was a problem. So when there's a problem and there's something that needs to be changed, change something. Change the grouping, change the reading material, change the written material, change how much time the kid gets, change something, and then document the snot out of that. Document it and then come back like 2 weeks later and say, did this improve this child's life? Are things still the same? What's going on for this child? What can we do as a part of this? So you cannot ignore a clearly failing IEP. Seriously, if the failing IEP, it's the district's obligation to do this. People ask me, do we settle a lot? Yes, we settle a lot. I was involved, not last year, but the year before, prior to COVID. I was involved in 85 lawsuits. 79 of those we settled because the district did not have data, trying to help determine whether a child was making progress or not. And that poses a significant problem. And I can't emphasize this enough as a part of this. So keep this in mind as we address this, and keep this in mind in things like this. So again, if you learn nothing else, I truly learned this. If the child is not making progress, it is your district's obligation to change something. And if that doesn't work, change something else. And if that doesn't work, change something else. If that doesn't work, change yet another thing. It is your district's obligation to do this. And I can't emphasize this enough as a part of this, okay? Some more. Let's talk about COVID. COVID, and oh, what a fun thing. And I just want to let you know, as someone who I did test positive almost exactly 2 weeks ago today, I tested positive. And for 14 days, I had 102-degree temperature with really bad, painful headaches, exhaustion. I lost my sense of smell, lost my sense of taste. I was basically just walking around my house as a zombie, as were all the others in my house. But my experiences, despite the fact that I had 102-degree temperature, my experience was fairly mild compared to others. I was not needing to be hospitalized. I was checking my pulse ox at regular time. So it was very different. But there are very different experiences out there. I'm working with some school districts right now where they can't get enough teachers in because all the teachers have tested positive. And so they're not able to provide supports for these kids, and it's posing a significant problem. And there's experiences are different where, think about, I want to just talk about the issues relating to the kids, is that some of these parents are losing jobs. Some of these parents are becoming very sick. Some of these parents are having all sorts of problems. It's posing significant problems. So the experiences are very different on this. But what we've really noticed, and you've noticed, I mean, we talk about the old days meaning early March, is remember in March we were talking about this, and we're saying if we could just make it to Memorial Day. Yeah, let's make it to Memorial Day. I think we can make, we didn't say which Memorial Day, but we talk about this, is that the change in our lifestyle, our change has been rather dramatic. And many of you, and I appreciate how Dr. Reinhardt emphasized this, the stress that many of you have experienced as a part of this. This is not for what many of you signed up for. So keep this in mind as we address this. We're all dealing with this. We're all dealing with this. I was communicating heavily with Guam, one of our territories. They're experiencing it rather dramatically. Their schools are closed. We're dealing with this across all of our territories in all the United States. So keep this in mind. It's been very stressful. But we have a desire for normalcy. We want to go back to school. Oh my God, I want to go back to school. I want to go back and just see kids in regular desks without having to worry if they're sneezing, if I'm going to get it, and things like this. We all this. And so that's the problem. That's the problem, is this desire for normalcy and how everyone's different about this. So there is not one COVID experience for all of us. You have to remember that some kids are incredibly stressed about this. I wrote a book that came out just prior to COVID about trauma-informed IEPs. And we have many of these kids who've experienced a great deal of trauma as a result of this. So that's something we need to pay attention to. But we don't know what's going to happen. Yes, we're talking about vaccines. We're talking about who's going to get these vaccines. How many vaccine booster shots are we going to have as a part of this? But also, as many of you experienced just with the Thanksgiving this past weekend, many of us are exhausted. We want to go back to normal. I mean, I want to go see my parents. My parents do not want to see me, especially when I tested positive. They absolutely did not want to see me. But it's interesting about this is and today's my mom's birthday. I would love to be having spent time with her and things like this, but that's not going to happen. We're all exhausted. So keep this in mind as we talk about this. All right. But for teachers, our experience is very different. I mean, can I click my heels 3 times and be back at normal school? I wish. I wish I could just, I wish when I walk down the street that I didn't have to cross over to the other side because of something like this. So we all experience this, okay? More, you lied. My kids are not a joy to have in class, okay? There are some parents who are experiencing all sorts of issues relating to this. So we have to keep this in mind and keep this in as we address this, okay? And if 2020 was an ice cream truck, 2020 has been a heck of a year. Just actually the past 6.5 weeks for me has been pretty hectic. Between I was in a bad crash and then I got COVID. Wonderful experiences there, things like this. It's going to come to an end, so keep this in mind, okay? But also, if schools are closed for too long, the parents are going to find a vaccine before the scientists. And I want to emphasize this, so keep this in mind. It's posing a problem. It's posing a problem because we're having to deal with this, and we're having to deal with a new stress that we have to pay attention to as a result of this, okay? So keep that in mind. And last, okay? And the schools can't control the spread of lice, the flu, pink eye, chickenpox. How the hell are they going to control COVID-19? I wish I could talk about this and say that we could control this. Little known fact is my son's girlfriend, when she was tested positive, she was living with us at the time. When the CDC contacted her for contract tracing, she was receiving her services at Walter Reed Medical Center in DC. And one thing they asked is that, were you around a dog? And our dog had been really sick about 2 weeks before. So you have no idea how we're getting these things. And I wish I knew this. Okay. So let me give you some legal tips. Legal tips is a part of this. Okay. Legal tips relating to COVID. And I can't, I mean, it would be remiss of me if I didn't talk about this. But first, just be compassionate. As I emphasized just a few minutes ago, everyone's experience with COVID is so very, very different. Our experience at our house was so very different. Having just come out of the quarantine period, we were, I was able to go to a store today for the first time in 2.5 weeks. And saying things like, yes, I wore a mask, but it's interesting about this is we were shut down. But be compassionate, be truly compassionate. So if a parent calls you and makes a demand on you, realize again that they're leading a life that they did not expect. They don't know what's going to happen. So just be compassionate. But one thing is focus on the laws. The laws have not changed. Your obligation to provide services for kids has not changed. So when I emphasized earlier, and I truly emphasize this, and I want you to pay attention to this, okay, is the fact that you need to make sure that kids are making progress. So if a kid is not making progress, that's when you need to do something, change something. So that whole spiel that I gave to you just a few minutes ago, please take that to heart. I really can't emphasize that enough. It is probably one of the most things, okay? But the last two things, they go kind of hand in hand, but I just want to emphasize this, is be a decent person. Just be a decent person. Be there to answer the parents' questions. Be there to provide supports. Be there to provide guidance. Be there to help the kids and answer questions for them. For many kids, you are the most rock solid part of their lives. And many of those, you understand this as these kids, they need you to be there. So, but just be helpful. Be helpful for what's going on and be assistance as part of this, okay? So keep that in mind as we talk about this, okay? More, child find. I talked earlier about this before when I was addressing the fact that my brother-in-law was not allowed to go to school for many years. It's because school districts did not often actually seek out and identify individuals. So one thing that you need to pay attention to, so when you go back, talk to your general education teacher staff, talk to about your administrators, if they're noticing that there's a child who's having an issue. Again, not all these kids are going to get special education. We emphasized that earlier. But if you have a child who's having an issue that may rise to the level of needs or supports, well, we have to think about it. If there's a suspicion that there's an issue, what we need to do is figure out what we can do to provide supports to make sure that this child is getting things like this. So provide supports for where we are with this and provide whatever we do, but make sure that they're aware. So if they see something, make sure they understand it more, okay? You should be figuring out how to document, obtain the needed information and completing the eligibility process. So there's what we need to do is figure out what can we do to provide appropriate supports for these kids and provide appropriate supports so that they can start addressing where we are with this. It's a vital part of the progress. Okay, more progress. Okay, I said this earlier, but I'm getting it back again just because I want to reiterate it because I can't emphasize this. All right, I just want to emphasize this enough. Not making progress, changes the IEP may be warranted. When in-person instruction returns, you should convene to see if the students are on track to meet IEP goals. So when you have access to the kids, I don't care what kind of access you have, you continue to document where we are with this and things like this. And so you have to think about what we have as a part of this so that we should document where we are with this. But then revisions relating to goals, services, placement, methodology may be considered to ensure the student is receiving FAPE. I said this earlier, but I can't emphasize this enough. I really want to emphasize this. So keep this in mind as we talk about this, okay? Tips for documentation, okay? I should start with the bottom one, but basically if it's not written down, it doesn't count. I do witness prep for school districts before due process hearings. And one thing that I want to emphasize is if it's, I want to see your notes. So what I'm recommending is keeping all sorts of notes. So be very specific about all contacts you have with parents, all attempts of contacts. So if you attempt to contact a parent through email, document that you've done this. If you do a call to a parent, document that you've done this. If you've set up a Zoom session or Google Hangout, FaceTime session, whatever the method that you're using with the parents, and you set this up and they don't show, document this. But make sure that you have very clear documentation about every single attempt that you can. And make sure that you, I really want to emphasize this, is that you have something that clearly articulates precisely what you've tried to do to clarify for this parent that you've communicated with them. And just come up with a system. I mean, I know a lot of school districts are using Google Docs, so they have systems that they can log into as a part of this. But if it's not written down, it doesn't count, things like this. So keep that in mind, okay? More, and I know some of you've had some issues relating to this, relating to privacy concerns, especially in sessions, things like this. When you're online with kids, you have to remind yourself. You have to remind yourself that not all kids have a computer in their room that they can use that we can trust them with. So they may be doing this in their kitchen, they may be doing this in a hall or a bathroom, wherever their Wi-Fi may be better. FERPA educational records includes video recordings. So if you're making a video recording of what you have, make sure that you keep track of where we are with this, okay? And so you keep track of where we are with this. Lock your Zoom session so that others can't join. As someone who this past fall has been Zoom bombed because I was not locking my session, it was a positive thing. A former student found out when my class was and just got on and started making burping sounds. And we couldn't figure out where, he changed his name, so we couldn't figure out where he was. And he quickly make the sound and then mute his button, so we couldn't figure out who it was. But keep that in mind. Headphones help schedule in your household. And so what can we do to provide assistance as a part of this to make it easier for people to participate? So, but I just want to emphasize that this is, it poses a problem for some of these kids, okay? Confidentiality is for parents, not grandparents, siblings, etc. Others may need to leave the room during a remote session. So one thing I want to emphasize for you is that you do not bring up privacy issues that might be related to privacy issues. So yes, I told you earlier today that today's my mom's birthday, but you're not going to celebrate a student's birthday in a Zoom session with other kids because that's identifiable information. So don't do that. Maybe in a private one-on-one session, do that, celebrate a kid's birthday, but not as part of a group session where others may be seeing this. This may seem like overkill, but I can't emphasize this, things like this, okay? Tips for working with students who do not log on, okay? Just contact the parents to discuss the reason and then document this, whatever you can. Work with parents and students to resolve issues and just keep trying. I can't emphasize this enough. I work with multiple school districts. So what we do is when we work on every Friday afternoon, I get on the Zoom with them and we talk about what worked for them this past week and what they're going to try differently this next week. And the mantra that we have with all these school districts, all the 5 school districts I'm working with right now, just on Friday afternoons, is whatever they're going to do, they're never going to say, we give up. They're just going to continue to try. So they're just going to continue to try and they're going to continue to come things like this, okay? So but be there for them, but just keep trying. There is no, we give up. There is no give up. So I can't emphasize this enough, okay? So I can't emphasize this enough for where we are with this, all right? So keep this in mind as we talk about this, all right? But one thing I want to talk about also is that there are some students, okay, who are more prepared for school than others, okay? They're prepared, they're ready, they're there, so keep that in mind. So when we're working with these students, they're going to be there and we need to work with them. So, but regardless of what they bring to us. But also, this is one of my favorite sayings about a 3-word saying about a student, is that there are some students who out there, no matter what we do, they will be a rebel. So keep this in mind as we address this and we can't pay attention to where we are with this, okay? So, okay, but here, okay, remember this. The student's IEP is a legal contract. Therefore, conduct all aspects of what we refer to it as a good faith efforts. You communicate with what's going on. You document where we are with the parents. You document the meetings. You document what's going on. I can't emphasize this enough, is that you need to be a part of this and you need to be addressed this and you need to be a part of this. The one thing that I want to recommend is that, and Dr. Reinhardt would probably emphasize this for me also, is be in communication with your special education director, right? There is we can handle things as long as it's not a surprise. COVID, yeah, absolutely a surprise. Absolutely a surprise. When I was in a plane crash 6 weeks ago, absolutely a surprise. But when I emphasize this is that what you need to keep in mind as a part of this is you need to help people as much as possible so that there are no surprises. But keep that in mind as we talk about this, okay? Well, one thing, and this is something, yes, some of you signed up to be a teacher. Signed to work day in, day out with kids face to face, right? But you got to remember to be flexible, okay? Not everything is covered in the training manual. I can absolutely guarantee that. As someone who works with situations with all sorts of very difficult issues, it's not always there. But keep in mind as we talk about this, okay? Keep in mind as we talk about this and address this, okay? So I'm going to conclude with words to use and words to avoid, okay? And why I want to emphasize this is, and these are terms and phrases you need to pay attention to. And I'm not just saying them just to say them. And I truly don't mean this. Is what I want to emphasize is that you say them and you mean them when you say them. So when you come to meetings with parents, whether it's an initial IEP, it's a revision of an IEP, whatever it is, talk to the parents and say, tell us your concerns. Seriously, tell us your concerns. Tell us your concerns so we can understand precisely what's going on with the child. I gave you that example earlier about that third grade girl, but tell us your concerns. Next, use the terms individual and individualized. And I want to emphasize this. Make sure that the IEP that we write for the child is individualized to the child based on their needs, okay? Based on their needs, okay? And so you have to think about this. It's individual to the child. The I of the IEP should actually stand for something. Things like this. Whenever a parent asks for something, and I don't care what they ask for, whenever they ask for, you fully consider it. You fully consider, is it necessary? Is it necessary for the child to receive an appropriate education? So that's what you have to think about. Is it necessary? So when you think about this, so you as a team pay attention to this, and you as a team address this. And then the next ones that kind of go together is the program you are offering. And I truly want you to be able to say this and mean it when you say this, is that the program we're offering for your child is appropriate. This is what we feel is appropriate. And keep that in mind. And the next two, these two clearly go together, is that the child is making meaningful progress. And so you can actually put those two together. So when you say that the child's making meaningful progress, you absolutely make sure to demonstrate the child's making meaningful progress. Because if the child is not making meaningful progress, what did I recommend you do? Is you reconvene the IEP team, change things, do something, and document it. But make sure that you use meaningful progress. And the last one, and this is really interesting about this, is that I see parents all the time not doing this, but I recognize that you do this. Is that you talk about this? Make sure you use person first language. We talk about the person first, the disability second. I was in a meeting about 4 years ago where the principal came in and said, we need to talk about this retarded child. Shut down all communication with the parents. These kids are kids first who happen to have a disability. Talk about them as having a disability first, and then address that and keep that in mind, okay? Words to avoid, okay? So use those words above as words to use, and make sure that you use them and mean them when you say them. Words to avoid generalizations, truly. Don't say all kids with learning disabilities get this. Don't say all kids with autism need this, because all kids with autism don't need this. Don't say that all kids with learning disabilities, because all kids with learning disabilities don't need certain things. Avoid generalizations. Focus on the individual specific needs of the child. The individual specific needs of the child. Pay attention to that and address that, okay? Next, avoid the notion that anything was decided prior to the meeting. One of the things that I really can't emphasize enough, and it's called predetermination, where you've predetermined that a child is going to receive services in a certain classroom by a certain teacher. No, don't make any predeterminations. Make the determinations based at the meeting. Maybe they may be consistent with what you thought was going to happen, but make sure we don't talk about it that way. Make sure that we let the meeting determine what's going on, okay? And then last, and this is one that I can't emphasize enough, don't say no to an idea without having an appropriate people fully consider. Like, tell me more about how that would look, or let's think about what we need for this child, what would be appropriate for this child. I really want to emphasize this, is that we need to make sure that we pay attention to what's going on. An appropriate answer to a parent when a parent asks for something is, I don't know. Let me get more information and I'll get back to you on this. And then you research that and then you get back to the parents in a timely fashion. I really want to emphasize this, is that you've fully considered exactly what's going on. Why? I worked very closely a few years ago with a parent who had some serious mental health issues. And you never knew when the parent walked in the room whether the parent was going to be screaming, laughing, and crying, what was going to go on. But there was a time when the parent sat there for like 20 minutes and was spot on, was incredible what this parent was saying. And we wrote every single thing down, and we worked to implement all the services for that. So you have to pay attention to what's going on and address where we are with this. Okay, so keep that in mind as we talk about this. Okay, last, that's me. That's me. That's me. That's actually in Indianapolis on your state capitol. There I am standing on your state capitol. So it's a great picture of me. That's why I like it, because it's from Indiana. So keep that in mind as we talk about this. So I'm gonna stop sharing my screen, and so see if we can just deal with any questions or concerns that people have, things like this. So okay. So if there's anything that I can do to address right now.
So it looks like Marcy and I and Dr. Summers and some other folks have been addressing some of the questions and just adding to your comments, but we'll open it up now. We have a few minutes left for any other questions that you all have for Dr. Bateman. Tammy, you can go ahead and unmute yourself. Marcy, do we need to unmute Tammy so she can speak?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, go for it.
Okay, I had a phone call with a parent today. I have a custody battle going on. I had no clue I was getting in the middle of it. The boy, there was a restraining order that we're completely virtual. We're not even in school right now. So the secretary went into the C file on the vault yesterday, and the restraining order is expired from the dad to the mom has a restraining order against the dad, but yet the two children, I only deal with one because he has his IEP and I see him 3 times a day. So he goes to dad's house with the living girlfriend, who is awesome, like a total normal parent. And then the following week he goes to mom, I had admin on the phone with me today when I was talking to her, and she was getting very hyped up because she can't get her son online. And she was making 3 major excuses that were unacceptable. And and then she started getting really upset and getting louder and things like that. And I finally said, we have to take this in little baby steps. You have to figure out how to get your son online. You need to call technology. I can't call technology. I'm moving. I won't be home till 12:30. I said, okay, well then what about at 12:30? Blah, blah, blah. So I guess my main question is, I don't like getting in the middle of all this. I feel like I don't even know what full custody means. I've been married for 36 years. I had to I had to ask her, if per my boss, if Timmy's father's, educational rights have been severed. And she didn't know what that meant. So I'm assuming they have not been. And the dad wrote me a note stating that his girlfriend, who is home with the kids all day on Google Classroom, I can talk to her about it. We can communicate, blah, blah, blah. So I have that. Is there anything I need to watch my back with on this?
Dr. Bateman?
Yes, I appreciate. And congratulations on being married from someone for longer than 3 decades. Likewise, I feel that I'm lucky that my wife still hangs out with me.
There you go.
But it's And I think so. I'm truly the lucky one here. But I say this is that you need to document all efforts that you have relating to this, and just first document all efforts, but document all forms of communication and all comments that you have with anyone relating to the provision of services for the child, because you just want to be as above board with both. Because if both have educational rights, you don't want to have one saying, you're going around the back of the other to get these things. So you just document every single form of communication you have with them. All forms of communication you need to share. So yes, there may be a restraining order, but you still, because you're virtual, and you invite both people to meetings, things like this. So just make sure that you just document all of it. I can't emphasize that enough, because it's the only way that I think you can actually cover what you're supposed to be doing, because you're technically being placed in the middle of a situation of which is a sticky one. There's no dispute on this one. There's no easy answer for this one, and so you just have to remind yourself that it's probably not going to come out in a fashion that is going to be beneficial to the child. So you control what you can control.
I felt like yesterday, Sunday night, the girlfriend of the father called me and talked for 15 minutes. And I feel like they're trying to bait me into saying things that I shouldn't be saying about the mom. I really do.
Yeah.
And I would keep it all to educational.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then document Tammy and Indiana IEP in the communications tab, because that'll keep everything all in one space. And if an attorney does get involved, you'll have it right there. It's easy to manipulate and get to the attorney. So just a great resource we have in Indiana.
Okay, I will do that. Okay.
And again, thank you for trying to provide services. So thank you very much.
Exactly. My husband was like, I can't believe you were trying to, he's like, it's that woman's responsibility to learn how to get her son on Google Classroom. Why are you saying you will make the call and tell her how to do it? He's like, you don't have time for this.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Mm-hmm. All right.
We did have another question in the chat, and it was just a question around updating the IEP to reflect what's happening virtually, if you'd like to touch on that.
Go ahead, Terry, you want to start with that one? I'll finish.
Sure. So our guidance has been that our IEPs need to reflect what we're offering, what our provisions are. And so, March, April, and May were definitely times when we were kind of in emergency mode, and we maybe had a remote learning plan that was a little bit separate from our IEP, but we're to the point now where we have to plan for this. We know this is our new normal. And so reflecting as much as you can in that IEP of what currently is happening. And again, we may have multiple revisions and multiple case conferences, but at this point, you don't want to get in a sticky situation where the IEP says one thing and you physically aren't able to provide that because of the pandemic. And so reflecting what you're doing, what you're able to offer, what is the best option for the students in the circumstances that are in front of you. Dr. Bateman?
I love what you said. I really did. Is to just document where you have with this, because you need to reflect where we are with this. And because that's what we're going to be held to a standard of, what are we doing with that child? Things like this.
I have one more question, if I could.
Sure.
And it's, I get so confused sometimes because I've gone to orientations and I meet different teachers and what they teach on a daily basis. My schedule, I have 5 different grades. It's back to back. It's constant. Yeah. I teach to my goals, but then, I might have some kids in 2nd grade who are learning at preschool level. Mm-hmm. So there's no way they're going to pass this math test. So I'm going to give this math test with accommodations. Okay, so how I run my classes, I teach the goals and I try and go through these lesson plans of these teachers, and I get the first part of their lesson and I introduce it. Am I obligated? Can I just teach to my goals? There are some teachers that just teach to their goals and they don't care about what's going on in that general education classroom. I mean, I've met people who do all things and I'm losing my mind.
I hear you. That's a heavy lift to try to have 5 different grade levels and create
In elementary.
quality lesson plans and provide access. And that's really the important piece, Tammy, is that you're giving opportunity and access to your students. So even if they're functioning below maybe what that academic standard is, you still want to give them the opportunity, because that's the piece that we have fought so hard for, and we continue to fight for, is access. And we don't want to take that away by separating them out and not providing that. So honestly, that's where the art of teaching comes in, and you're not expected as a first-year teacher, or even after 10 years, to really know how to do that. There are curveballs thrown at you multiple times, and so just being able to, you're not going to eat the elephant in one bite. You're going to bite off pieces at a time and prioritize and figure out what are the things that are manageable, what are the priorities that each individual scholar needs, and then how do you go about that? And maybe they're not going to do everything exactly as the general education teacher wants, but again, by prioritizing, you're going to figure out what's most important, but still providing access to that core curriculum and the academic standards.
Okay.
Dr. Bateman, do you want to add to that?
Well, at a minimum, I appreciate the fact that, and thank you for your service and what you're doing. I can't tell you how much about this, is at a minimum, we need to make sure that we're providing things relating to the IEP and the special education that we're supposed to be doing. But if there are other things we can do to help the kids in the general education curriculum, because as we said, most of these kids are in the general education curriculum most of the time. And so what you can do is, it's wonderful if you can do that. So at a minimum, get the special ed there, but then what we can do to help them as much as possible, because that's where the kids often flounder. And we need to do what we can to provide them that supports.
Okay.
And Tammy, you have access now as a CEC member to the community, which is an online community of supports. And honestly, I use it a lot to throw questions out there, to get ideas, activities. So if you have a student that's in the 2nd grade level, maybe working on a specific standard, you can throw that in there and ask, hey, does anybody have anything that's more of a preschool level, but still working on a similar skill? You're going to get some responses pretty quickly from, honestly, experts all around the world. And so that's another great benefit of CEC and being a member of this great community, is that you don't just have access to all of us, but you have access to people all over. And they're pretty quick to give you something that you don't have to spend a lot of time making. It's there, it's ready for you. Someone else is struggling as well. And so, just to have that, have someone there to help you, and do reach out to all of us. You have our emails, you can get to our website and find us. If there's something we can help you with, that's what we're here for.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So one final thing.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to address some of the questions in the chat. There's some resources that I'm going to push on you that are free. Is if you have access to the Google, type in IRIS at Vanderbilt, and so it's the U.S. Department of Education has put out a variety of resources through what's called the IRIS Center. And if you go to the IRIS Center at Vanderbilt, there's a lot of resources there. I see the person who was an RBT, like my daughter who's studying with BSBA. There's some great resources there on behavior management. There's some great resources on working with parents. There's some great resources on spending time. I just wrote one for administrators, what they need to know about implementing IEPs. So there's some great, and they're all free. So it's got a wealth of information. So I push this out there. It's got great resources that I really do want to emphasize for you. So keep that in mind as a part of this.
Great. Okay.
I just wanted to let you know that we have a couple hands raised, so I want to address those. So Carrie, if you want to go ahead. Carrie, are you able to speak?
Hello?
Okay, perfect.
Okay, I think I unmuted at the same time you muted it. Okay. The question I have is about if they're not making progress, that we need to change something or make a change. I have a student with an emotional disability who I have been tracking since Labor Day. I have all kinds of data and was actually ready to take that data to like the Office of Special Services and like take it a little bit farther and see what we could do and what they suggested. And then we went virtual. He's still continuing to do the same behavior in the virtual setting, interrupting, making noises with his mute button and stuff, not doing his work, refusing services constantly. So I didn't know, because we're in the virtual setting, is it okay to continue? Like, I've still been documenting the things that are happening online. Is it okay to continue moving forward with trying to make a change for him?
If possible, yes.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely. And I appreciate the spirit behind your question. And thank you very much for phrasing it. I really do appreciate what you're doing. Is document, but also try to figure out what can we do that works for this child, and see if there's ways. Maybe this child needs more one-on-one supports, or a paraprofessional working one-on-one with them to talk about them and talk about appropriate online behavior. So one thing is, we often assume that these kids understand what online behavior is. They're used to interrupting. They're used to gaming. They're not used to instruction. And so what we have to think about is providing supports for these kids so they understand precisely what they need to be doing. But look at where the problems are and see if there's ways that we can provide additional supports. No, the spirit behind your question is wonderful. The frustrating part is it's virtual, and I apologize for that, and I have no control over that. I wish I could give you COVID immunity right now from what I've just experienced in the past few weeks, but it's not. It doesn't happen that way. So. Yes, you're exactly right. Keep doing what you're doing.
And I think a follow-up to that is how with them. Okay, so he was refusing services in the building. So I would push into his classroom and provide his services in the classroom because he refused to come out of the classroom for services. How can I do that? Like, I push into their Google Classroom Meets to like observe his behavior and his participation, and I'm checking, whether he's doing assignments and work completion and all that stuff, but I can't like push in per se because he's virtual.
Right.
Yeah, so yeah, that's a good point. Some of the things that we have been talking about is if the teacher is doing maybe some breakout rooms, just ensuring that you're in his breakout room to do some, intentional instruction. If he's not engaging with you separately online, just keep documenting that push-in service and what you're doing.
Okay.
And then always we can always go back to case conference and talk about, as Dr. Bateman said, let's revise the IEP to make changes in what our instruction might look like, what other strategies we could use if we need to provide some more support. What are the barriers getting in the way of him engaging in that instruction? And again, maybe whether it's for some students, virtual is better because, as Dr. Bateman said, they're used to the virtual world. And for some of our students with behavioral disorders, they don't have the audience as much. They don't have the anxiety as much of sitting in the classroom. And so sometimes it's better, but sometimes it's not. And so trying to figure out what are those barriers, and then how do we go about finding what's going to work in the time we're in, and then trialing. Unfortunately, it takes lots of trialing and lots of trying different kinds of interventions. And as Dr. Summers said, is there some kind of particular interest or strength or ability that we can tap into?
The only thing he wants to do really is play games. And even like in the building, we still struggle with that. He's constantly wanting to play games. And it's just a refusal to do the work. So
we just got to figure out why. Yeah. It's that idea of, the FBA process of figuring out what's getting in the way, what's the underlying or the root cause of the behavior of refusal. There, as Dr. Green, we use Ross Green's work, as he says, we got to go upstream and we got to figure out the refusal is downstream. That's the behavior we see, but what is that upstream work that we might need to do with him? And honestly, getting voice, seeing if there's a way, if he won't talk to you about what's getting in the way, will he talk to someone else? And, can we leverage maybe not only, as Dr. Summers said, specific interests, but maybe a specific person? Does he have a safe person that we can do? And you and I know we can obviously work this one together, because we are about 15 minutes over. But yeah, definitely shoot me an email and we'll work it out. And I'm happy to brainstorm with you and kind of work it out.
Okay, thanks.
And Dr. Summers, yes, I love Kahoots. Kids love Kahoots. So you could try Kahoot.
All right, I did post in the chat.
Participate.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I said we've tried Kahoot in the classroom and he doesn't participate. So
okay,
it's just he's a puzzle to me.
Yeah. That's what keeps us going, right?
Yeah.
That's why they pay you the big bucks.
Right. We wish.
Well, you have in the chat that Caroline also has a similar kiddo, so maybe you can brainstorm together, and that's the purpose of these sessions.
Yes.
I did note in the chat that because we're a little bit after, that we will pose one more question. We've had somebody with their hand raised for quite some time, and I'm sorry if I say your name wrong, but Rakia, if that's correct, I'm going to go ahead and allow you to speak now, and we'll finish up with your question for tonight, if that sounds good with everyone. Also, just a little plug first, you will notice that the additional sessions that we have are listed on the slide, so please be aware of that. And I did put a link in the chat to the evaluation for tonight. So for those of you who aren't able to stay, we completely understand, but I wanted you to have that information as well. All right, go ahead, you should be unmuted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. I do apologize. My son played a state game this week. He plays for Westfield and they made it to state at Lucas Oil Stadium. I got sick, so it's hard to understand me. I apologize. I try to drink a lot of lemon and tea to kind of feel better, but I had to put that plug in there for Coach Gilbert. We came in, we didn't run state, Center Grove did, but hey, we're going for the Gusto next year.
That's right.
This is my, I've been working with kids off and on now in special education all 4 years, but really in the teaching aspect of it recently. And it's something that you have to get it's like until that oil and that wheel is turned, you're going to be rusty. And I'm just saying that because nobody should beat themselves up over what they cannot do. Just being there alone is doing a lot for that child. And I know it was a couple callers back. It was a lady, I think it might have been the one who was married for X amount of years. I can't remember, or it might have been the caller after her. She was talking about what she does for a scholar who is struggling in the classroom, academically wise. And I have a scholar like that, and who really, I did not think it was possible for a child to think the way they did. But if I say, what is 3 + 3? He could give me any answer but 6. And I didn't know that was possible. So I had to realize that he is a visual learner. So I went out and got this game, and you probably don't have to go out and buy anything, but you can probably take like base 10 blocks or whatever. And he has to have, he can be tangible with it as well as the visual of it. And so now he's able to see all 3 + 3, is equals 6, because he has to see it. Now, in order to get him to do that and work on some of his accommodations or his goals, I do like exit tickets and the bell ringers. And as long as he's doing like a fraction of it, maybe 6 questions, and I can see that he's making some kind of progress, I'm actually incorporating his goals into it. So like, I can't remember the young lady who said it earlier, how do you eat an elephant? Like one bite at a time. It's kind of like, how do you just work on his goal, like just a little section of it, but as long as you're working on it, you can just break it up. That's the way I decided to go about it, because I was stunned for a moment. He seems really cognitive in some areas. He does have a DD type of disability because he is 8, but he is getting older now. And I struggled with him. I struggle with him mainly with his hyperattention. He's very hyperactive, and the attention span is really not there. So that's one thing I was thinking about trying, was maybe just seeing exactly how that child learns, if they're visual, if they're more tactile or auditory. So those are just some things that you can do. I thought,
Yeah, thank you for adding that. That's really important. So I think, obviously this group is so valuable to us, to each other. And so please utilize each other. And, I think you have our emails. We'll continue to work with our experts in the field, like Dr. Bateman, coming up then February 10th and April 14th and June 23rd. So we hope to see you soon and join us again. And let's all give Dr. Bateman a huge thanks for joining us. We can't imagine getting such talented folks that get to share their expertise with us as new teachers and new educators in this field. And we just really appreciate your time, and so glad that you're starting to feel better.
Yeah, me too. Thanks. Okay. Thank you.
Lots of thank yous in the chat, Dr. Bateman.
All right. Thanks.
Have a great evening. Thanks, everybody. And please feel free to email us if you have any questions about upcoming events or any questions that we can pass along to Dr. Bateman or Dr. Reinhardt so that we can make sure we answer all of those for you. Have a great evening.
Thank you.